Report live from Tel Aviv, from Juarez, Mexico. Tonight, top story reporting from Baltimore at the Key Bridge disaster.
When you look over your shoulder and you see the Key Bridge, what goes through your head?
That bridge has been here longer than I've been alive. It still doesn't feel real.
Hundreds of Israelis have gathered to demonstrate. What do the people in Gaza, do you think, what do they need most?
Place where Palestinians and Israelis have found common ground.
Every night, it's your news playlist. Top Story with Tom Llamas. Streaming weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now.
Welcome back to our coverage of the first presidential debate. We are inside the spin room live. You're looking at one of our roaming cameras here as it twirls around the spin room, I should say, spinning at times. A lot of surrogates out there. Senator Ralph Warnock is here for, of course, President Biden. We also talked about Gavin Newsom is in the House. We've all seen Vivek Ramaswamy. He's here for former President Trump. Back up here, we all want to talk to some voters, as we were just discussing with Congresswoman Crockett. Black voters were key to President Biden's victory back in 2020, but this year, as we mentioned, he might be facing a slightly uphill battle there with a lot of people identifying as undecided. I want to go over to my colleague, NBC Shaq Brewster, with one such group in Pennsylvania. Shaq, talk to me about what you're seeing there. Recent polls are showing Biden's support slipping among black voters. In Pennsylvania, where you are, he won 76% of the black vote in 2020. Now he's polling around 56. Are you seeing that sentiment there? Are you hearing that sentiment?
Well, it's that shift that you're describing right now that we're trying to dig into here in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a place that, if you look at just the past month, we've seen visits here from former President Trump. Just last weekend, we saw President Biden here late last month. So it's a place where you see both candidates targeting black voters. So that's why we're here in Philadelphia, going to watch the debate with some folks now. I wanted to introduce you to them right now. And as we start this conversation, just raise your hand for me if you voted for Biden in 2020. Keep your hand up if you are still with him this time around, currently. Only one. Why'd you put your hand down, Will? What are you looking for from him this time around?
Well, I'm undecided. I mean, seeing the things he's done in the last 4 years that I wasn't kind of pleased with. So I'm trying to see what he has to offer in the next 4 years, and if he's clear on what it is that agenda is too as well. So I want to hear him out tonight. This might be a deciding factor for me.
What is the issue that you're listening for the most?
The issue is the economy, things that's going on in the economy, of supporting other nations. I'm saying supporting the war and not promoting for peace in the war. The prices of housing, gas, all these things are affecting us today, you know, so.
You want those things to be addressed?
Yes.
Sharon, why are you still with President Biden right now?
I'm still with President Biden because I think that there just aren't that many other choices for this.
Trump for you is not an option.
No,
Why
Trump
not?
is not an option. I don't agree with a lot of the policies that he's enacted. I'm very concerned about some of the think groups that are supporting him and what they have in store for the future, which doesn't include people that look like me. I'm very concerned about that.
Seth, you voted for Biden in 2020. Right now, you're withholding your support. What can he say on that stage tonight to get your support back?
I did vote for Biden in 2020. I voted uncommitted in the primary. It's really hard to vote for somebody who is actively supporting genocide in Gaza. Young people, people of color, pro-peace, have been sending a message to Biden now for months and months and months. And he's signaling, but he has not said, we're not sending any more arms to Israel. He's not using his full power to push for a ceasefire and peace. And I really need to see that. Also, the things Will said, I need that the economy is not great for working people. And I need them to have a policy to address it, because housing inflation, food costs, everything is through the roof. People are really struggling. And I feel like we're being gaslit by the Democratic Party, who's telling us the economy is great and there's no problems.
Well, let's see what we hear on that debate stage. And I think that gives you a sense of what we see in polling, where you have economy is #1 issue for voters, and you're hearing that reflected in these voters who will be watching the debate coming up soon.
Shaq, Brewster, these focus groups are so insightful. We appreciate all your reporting. We always learn something new. As we mentioned, the Commission on Presidential Debates shut out completely tonight, right? With the candidates and the host network, CNN, making their own rules. So what impact will that have on the debate tonight and any future ones we might see? I want to bring in two people who know the political media landscape very well. First up, Greg Bluestein.
Guys, let me break in here real quick and say good evening, everyone. We were just watching the NBC broadcast. As I was finishing eating, I had to get up, get a shower, get eaten. Broadcast note, I am still very much fighting a head cold. I've had a head cold since about last week. Today is the first day I feel like I've had a brain. Today is the first day I've been able to talk for about longer than 5 minutes. Today's the first day I've made all my meetings this week. So, bear with me. if I seem maybe a little tired, a little down, and all that type of thing, that would be that. I also just decided not to bother. I could either put on makeup or eat, and I chose to eat, so here we are. But I was doing some pre-chat with one of my super fans, and he was watching NBC, and I'm like, oh, we can put that on. So I wanted to kind of run through the state of play real quick before we switch over to the broadcast at 9. So this debate tonight was arranged by the campaigns, the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign, with CNN for this debate tonight on June the 27th. There'll be another one on ABC News in September, right after Labor Day. And so the Commission on Presidential Debates is not involved in any of this tonight. There's like the League of Women Voters and all these organizations that used to do this sort of thing. There has been no announcement of a vice presidential debate. I think that's because Trump has not announced his VP pick yet. So we may pick up a VP debate somewhere along in the summer. Although there's limited opportunity to do one, because, you know, you want to have that before the next presidential, which is in September, so you have July, August to get that done. So that's happening. Interestingly enough tonight, there will be no audience. So there'll be no shouting down by Trump supporters, no fights in the crowd, no Gaza protests from Biden people, nothing like that. It's a relatively intimate setting. It's a TV studio, which looks big on television, but they're actually not. TV studios are actually pretty small because they have to be floated on 3 corners for soundproofing and all this type of thing. So they're relatively small. The podiums are going to be 8 feet apart. I don't know if there'll be a ceremonial handshake or anything like that. The biggest thing tonight is that each candidate, after each question, and I believe the moderators are Jake Tapper and another CNN anchor, Dana Bash, I think. They'll have 2 minutes to respond, and then they will be cutting off the mics. They did a whole intro thing last night where they demonstrated how that would work, and that should keep Trump under control and not trying to dominate the conversation the whole time. On the bright side, it also keeps Biden out of doing any rambling stories about Corn Pop and his friends from the 50s. So that's kind of what's baked in tonight. They were showing on NBC News the whole spin room and everything. There'll be lots of commentary. Everyone will be talking about this. This will be the first real chance voters have had to look at these candidates side by side on stage together. And I imagine Biden's going to focus on policy. Here's what I've done for you. Here's what we've accomplished. Here's the hole we dug ourselves out of. Trump is going to probably be entirely reactionary. And is probably just going to reinforce his usual talking points. Lately in his speeches, he's not really been able to stay on topic. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out for him this evening. It's going to be interesting. This is the first time we've seen these two together in 4 years. Raw, unfiltered. I will say this is, to some degree, this will be interesting because this debate is high stakes for both candidates for different reasons. The Trump campaign, they've not really been campaigning because they can't afford to. The Trump campaign has very little money, as compared to the Biden camp, which I think they're $400 million in, sort of thing, and the Trump campaign I think only has 100. They did raise $53 million after his last conviction, so at least the conviction was good for business. And the Biden campaign needs this to go well because of a lot of the concerns we were hearing from those voters on NBC News. His base is unhappy about Gaza. A lot of people are unhappy about Gaza. The economy is very tough. People feel worse off than they were 4 years ago. And in a presidential election, that's political poison. If you're the president and people don't feel good about your years in office and they feel like they're worse off, that can end up leading to electoral disaster. So Biden really needs to reinforce what he has gotten right, he has done, what has happened, and what he's going to try to do to control cost of living, things like this. Trump needs this to go well because this is a real chance for him to hit a national audience and campaign to not his base. Even his support even his support in among his own party is beginning to slip by a lot. This is mostly because you have a non-zero contingent of the GOP that won't vote for Biden, but they're not ready for Trump. Nikki Haley keeps winning primaries, and she's not even running for president anymore. She's commanding a solid 30 to 40% of the vote. That's a problem for Trump. Trump needs his base to come home. Biden needs to convince his base that he's still the best bet. Not that Biden's base really ever left, but he, is hoping to kind of shore up support, I think, which is going to be very important. Trump needs some of his voters to come home. So in that way, Trump has a bigger hill to climb than Biden does. However, and here's what's important, there will be polling done over this weekend. Polls will come out Monday, Tuesday next week. Now, I don't read polls until at least October, but it's about narrative. If Trump does well and there's a polling shift, he'll get a narrative shift and he'll get a narrative bump. If Biden doesn't do well, obviously, that'll be a narrative shift and he won't do well. If the opposite is true, if Biden does really well and Trump falters, Biden gets a narrative shift in Biden's favor. And that can really carry through the rest of the summer, especially as we get into the conventions late next month. So, in this way, both camps need their candidates to do well. Both men need to come out of this debate doing well. Only one of them is going to be able to really capture the narrative. That's the reality of the situation. So it's a difficult thing. I think the format is very structured. I imagine the questions will be on a wide variety of topics. The debate is 90 minutes long, so we should be able to hit domestic policy, foreign policy, Supreme Court decisions, all sorts of things. There should be chance for even rebuttal. There'll be lots of, I'm sure, social media TikTokable moments that will be spreading late tonight and into tomorrow. That also can be a significant kind of thing with the narrative shift in terms of people's immediate social media reactions can really set narrative going into the weekend, which will also affect the polling data. So to some degree, Biden needs to get some zingers in there. If Biden can create a couple viral moments where he tells Trump to shut up again or says something really brilliant and erudite or whatever have you, then that can spread around on social media and that can be a narrative help. But the converse is also true for Trump. If Trump can get in some good lines, which he's notorious for doing, if he can get in some solid digs into Biden and his record and all this type of thing, then conversely, he also could do well on social media. There are a couple phrases I know Trump's probably going to want to lean into. One is a very familiar one, the Biden crime family. Just get ready to hear that, because he'll probably bring it up at some point. You also, conversely, will probably hear Biden talk about his 34 felony convictions. And if we really want a felon as president, even though Trump can't vote in Florida anymore. So, excuse me, cold. So, that's kind of what's at stake tonight. That's what's going on. That's what we're looking for. Whether either of the campaigns admit it or not, there's probably a lot of people that are going to make a lot of decisions about who they're voting for tonight. So in that way, this kind of first outing is going to really matter in a way it ordinarily wouldn't. And I think that's partly because, for better or for worse, These are both known quantities. It's very rare in American history where we've had two people. In fact, I can only think of one other time under Grover Cleveland, actually, now that I come sit here to think about it, where we have two candidates, both of whom we've lived under. We had the Trump years, 2017 to 2021. We've had the Biden years, 2021 to now. And so we have they are both known quantities. We know what life is like under each one. We kind of understand what has gone on, what worked, what didn't, all this type of thing. I don't imagine we're going to talk a lot about pandemic response, but it may come up. But these are two known quantities. And so for people who are, undecisive about, do we need to go backwards? Do we need to stay moving forwards? And depending on who you voted for in 2020, depends on what side of the statement you fall under. Is going to be a pretty significant thing. So it's difficult. It's difficult. I can tell you there is, and I see it on social media and elsewhere. I see a deep dissatisfaction among voters with their choices this time. And that's no surprise. Biden was never terribly popular to begin with. He got into office simply for being not Donald J. Trump. Trump has already, spent all these years, consistently pissing off a good solid half of the country. So, I think people would much, much rather have, anyone else but these two. And so I think a lot of people are caught in this middle of this sort of weird Faustian bargain of like, we don't like either of them. Who are we holding our nose for? And you have diehard MAGA people that will, always vote Trump no matter what. You have some Republicans that would really wish it were somebody else. Then you have Democrats, the blue no matter who. And then you have Democrats who are kind of like, I don't really want to vote for Trump, but Biden's not that great either. And so, this election is going to be decided in 7 states by about 500,000 people. So in that way, tonight does really matter. Historically, presidential debates especially first presidential debates, don't matter that much. It's the one nearest to the election that really matters. Tonight, this one actually really matters, I think, in a weird way. We're in this very odd historical time where these things really actually do matter. So, that's kind of my lead-in commentary for tonight. We have about 15 minutes before the debate starts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put NBC News back on. We're going to watch for a few minutes. I have HBO Max, so we're going to flip over to that to watch the actual debate at 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 Central, 7 Mountain, 6 Pacific. And then we'll go from there. So I'll be watching along with you guys. I'll do little commentary throughout. I imagine CNN will have ad breaks, so we can be active in the chat and chat in between the ad breaks as well. So make sure to be nice to each other in chat. In a lot of these things, tempers can flare, things can get high. So please do be kind to each other in the chat. I don't want to have to ban anybody or anything like that, because I try not to do that. We want to have an open forum here, because that's what the Cameron Journal is all about. So, yes, if you are new to the broadcast or new to the live or whatever have you, because we're broadcasting on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch, if you're new to all of this type of thing, my name is Cameron Cowan. I am the creative director of CameronJournal.com. We do news, politics, and culture. If you haven't visited CameronJournal.com, please do so. Find me on all the social media and follow along. I ordinarily do great interviews and stuff with people once a week. One of these days, weeks, months, years, decades, I will get back to doing my weekly news broadcast that I normally do on Monday nights. But for tonight, we have a special event, so I'm live. I did an impromptu one for the State of the Union back in January, and it was surprisingly popular. People watched it after. So when they announced these debates, I knew that we would want to do a live for them. So that's very exciting. So I'm gonna put back on some NBC News. I'll get something to drink because my throat is dry, so dry, and And we're gonna go from there. All right, here we go. Here we go.
Try to restore women's rights.
The polls show many voters across the country have serious concerns about President Biden's age. How do you respond to that? Do you have any concerns about his age going forward?
I don't have any concerns about his age. I think that his mind is still intact. I think that he's still out here fighting and doing the work for the American people. And if all else fails, we've got Kamala to go with.
All right, Whitney, thanks so much. It's really good to meet you. You know, Tom, this is what we're hearing. These, of course, are Biden supporters. These are the people that think he will win this debate. But this is what the campaign is trying to do now that we're into the main stretch of this campaign. They're really trying to show that once people tune in to this race, that support will increase for President Biden. So, again, we're just a few minutes away. We expect this room to get a little bit more full over the next few minutes. Tom and Halleck.
All right, our White House correspondent, Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, always great to talk to you. And as our debate countdown takes closer to zero, we have two political pros to help us break down the issues and the strategy. Director of Communications for Trump's 2020 campaign, Mark Lauder, joins us back. And Philippe Reines, former senior advisor and spokesperson for Hillary Clinton. Philippe, I'm going to start with you, right? You played Donald Trump famously in the debate prep for Hillary Clinton. Talk to me about how you created that Trump role and what benefit it was to Hillary Clinton.
Well, Trump created the role, and I think in the years since, we've all had a good dose of it, and most of America could probably put on a pretty good impersonation. You know, part of debate prep, which I know my counterpart will say that Donald Trump doesn't participate in, which is simply not true. He absolutely does. It might be different, it might be unorthodox, but he absolutely prepares. It's to give the candidates opportunities just to see things, scenarios, to eliminate surprises. And obviously, it's very different debating Donald Trump than, say, Mitt Romney. And at the time, Donald Trump had never debated anyone one-on-one. So it wasn't just a matter of us learning about Donald Trump. It was Donald Trump also learning about Donald Trump in terms of those settings. Now, they're very different than the primary debates. So, you know, I think Donald Trump, debating is arguing and disagreeing, and Donald Trump, on that definition, has been preparing for a debate for 78 years.
Philippe, to be fair, some people thought that Donald Trump won some of those debates, right? And I do want to ask you, as you prepared Hillary Clinton for the debates, hold on. As you prepared Hillary Clinton for the debates, what surprised you about former President Trump's performance?
Really nothing, because he's an incredibly unpredictable person. Watching all 11 or 12 of the primary debates several times, as well as watching several rallies, he really did not veer from much. He's very repetitive. The only question now, because he is a different candidate now than he was 4 years ago, let alone 8 years ago, is that he doesn't have a strategy. He has a list, mostly grievances, things that bother him, but also policy issues like immigration and inflation that he really relishes going after. But to take issue with what you started with, he has debated one-on-one 5 times, 3 against Hillary and 2 against Joe Biden. I don't think anyone with a straight face can say that he won even a single one of those. You might want to say that the others didn't. Hillary walloped him at least twice. He's just being on TV and ranting is not being a good debater. And I think that's it's not just me standing up for my candidate, which I am, but that's a real risk of him doing tonight, is that he comes in and he's so intent on showing Joe Biden as this feeble, senile old man that he's not. And that to do so, he just throws everything at him, both personal, both negative, and frankly, just a blizzard of data and figures that might not be made up.
Yeah.
And in the course of doing that, he might not look to be the person that people are considering. And remember, a lot of people are thinking about whether or not they can stick with him after his convictions.
Yeah. So Mark, I want to ask you. Philippe said a lot there. And you can fire back if you want. But I do want to ask you a point he made, which is that Trump does talk about a list of grievances, right? He talks about a list of grievances. How does he turn that into actual debate points that mean something to viewers and to voters?
Well, I would suggest that he not go into whether it's the legal side or relitigating 2020. That's in the past. What these elections are about is the future. And I think on all of the policy fronts, whether it's inflation, the economy, the border border, the wars, all of those kinds of things. Right now, they are all playing to Donald Trump's strength. And people like his results better than they like Joe Biden's results. So if you're talking about the things that matter to people at home, you're winning the debate. If you're probably talking about things that matter to you personally, then that's probably not the winning strategy.
Philippe, I got to ask you, what, after observing Trump during those debates with Hillary Clinton, did you find to be the most effective strategy to knock him off kilter?
You know, first, I want to agree with what Mark just said, because, you know, the very beginning of his statement about Donald Trump shouldn't come in and talk about his grievances, that's exactly the advice that I think most people would give. And I'm sure a lot of people around him are giving, but that's probably not what he can do, and certainly not for 90 minutes. In terms of learning about him, again, he's a different candidate now than 8 years ago, because then he really did have a strong message about immigration, Obamacare, jobs going south, and obviously he had a healthy dose of attacks on Hillary. But fast forward to 2020, he really just became very mad, for lack of a better word, about Russia, the impeachment, and then that added on to what he feels was an unfair election. And now the convictions, the gagging, I'm sure he will pretend that he didn't know he's being muted. And the reason I'm going through all that is because in a way, originally, it was easy to trigger him. So, for instance, at the very end of the very first debate, I mean, within seconds of the end, Hillary brought up, I believe her name was Alyssa Machado. She was a beauty pageant contestant in one of, and Hillary said, and Donald called her fat or cow. And if you watch the response, he gets very unnerved. It is harder to do that with him now, because he's in that headspace to begin with. You know, he is erratic in terms of the tenor and the degree of like how much torque he has on attacks. But he's within that bandwidth more than usual than he was
Philippe,
in 2016.
We gotta go. Yeah. Philippe, we thank you for all your insight. It really was insightful. Appreciate it. Yeah, no. I'm good, man. Philippe, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Mark Lauder, you're a gentleman. Thank you for listening to Philippe as well. I appreciate that. I do want to bring in now our Mount Rushmore of political reporters, if you will. Truly the best of the best here at NBC News. Meet the press moderator, Kristen Welker, national political correspondent, Steve Kornacki, chief political analyst, Chuck Todd, and senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson. I also think we almost have, maybe we have a basketball team. I don't know if we have a softball team, but we could definitely do some damage somewhere. Kristen, I'm going to start with you, right? What makes tonight's debate so important?
Well, Tom, a couple of things. I think, one, tonight is one of the first really big chances to shake up this race. As we head into tonight, President Biden is trailing within the margin of error, with not only nationally, but within key battleground states. And so from the perspective of the Biden campaign, they are viewing this as a chance to change the shape of this race, for President Biden to talk about his accomplishments, to talk about what he believes his record is on the border. For example, he just took those executive actions on the border. He's trying to flip the script on Donald Trump, who's obviously made that a critical issue. And also, of course, reproductive rights. He'll take the gloves off, I think, when it comes to Trump's criminal convictions. But, Tom, look, you and I were talking about this earlier. I think this debate will be as much about the performances of these two candidates as it is about the policy discussions that we see unfold tonight. If Donald Trump gets on the stage, if he's unhinged, if Biden has a big misstep, those sorts of things could wind up dominating the debate. But again, this debate tonight is a chance for this race to really start to be shaken up.
Chuck, I want you to put this into sort of perspective and give us your insight as well. You know, this is going to be a first in a lot of ways, because we don't have the Commission on Presidential Debates taking part in this. The mics are going to be cut off. There's also this issue about fact checks. And as a loyal listener to the Chuck Toddcast, I know you have your thoughts about those fact checks. And you're of the school that is actually not a bad idea. Explain to our viewers why.
No, look, I think that the debate itself, the candidates are there to fact check each other. Yeah. And ultimately, that's the first place that it should happen. You know, I think I think moderators need to have a light touch on this, because there's a fine line between correcting a fact and participating in the debate as looking like you're having the back and forth. And again, you know, when you do that, and even when you don't mean to do it, you're trying. Trust me, we all have especially when you've run a talk show and you've done your own thing before, you're used to jumping in. But ultimately, the viewer, you're doing a disservice to the viewers. Let's see how the candidates fact check each other on that front. And then look, you do a rigorous fact check in other places, and sometimes those things matter a lot. But if you do it in the middle of the debate, you really could disrupt the flow. And again, I really think do a disservice to the voters who are trying to take a measure. Hey, are the two candidates aware? Is candidate X aware that candidate Y was just completely wrong about this?
The stakes are so high for President Trump. We've argued that the Trump campaign has sort of lowered the bar for the Biden team. What is a victory for President Biden? Does he have to just survive, or does he have to actually deliver?
It's interesting when you talk about this idea of the expectations game, because this has come up in some of my conversations with folks close to both candidates here, and it was encapsulated, interestingly, by two people on very different ends of the political spectrum. Megyn Kelly, on the one hand, suggesting that all President Biden has to do is not pass out. Right. Hillary Clinton suggesting that all former President Trump has to do is not literally light himself on fire. I mean, that's sort of where extremes, things are. Right. Yeah, absolutely extremes, but also this idea that for both candidates, you talk about how they're treating this debate. I do get the sense that both of them are treating this with at least the respect that the audience of tens of millions could have, right? Setting aside whether or not we're going to see a more disciplined Donald Trump, whether we're going to see a more energetic President Biden, whatever, the bottom line is they know that there will be eyeballs on this debate, and that this is in many ways a key moment to, if not reset where the campaign is, at least press that starting gun in a big way heading into the conventions, and then obviously making that turn after Labor Day for debate number 2. Because remember, there's another debate coming up in the fall when presumably more people traditionally have engaged in the political spectrum.
But that's if it happens. We'll have to see. Maybe that one doesn't even happen. We don't know what happens after tonight. Steve, I do want to ask you, a lot of people, when they're talking about this election, they're talking about 6 on 6, right? There's 6% of voters in 6 states that are going to decide this election, right? What do those voters want to hear about? What exactly do they want to hear to make their decision?
Well, look, I think they're looking at the same thing voters in every state are looking at here, and it's probably just at a very basic level here, just about how these guys handle themselves. And age obviously looms over this race in a way, this debate in a way that it hasn't in past ones. But the reality of that map you just put up there in terms of where this election is headed, I think is interesting, because of those states there, those were Biden states in 2020, all 6 of those. And if you look at the polling right now and you look at the demographics, you see 3 of those that Trump is better positioned in than the other 3. The 3 he's best positioned in, Trump, to flip would be Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. The polling's been better for him there, and where he's made inroads, at least in the polling, has been with non-white voters. Those states have larger non-white populations. But here's the thing for Trump. If he were to flip all of those states, that would get him to 268 electoral votes. You need 270. So he would then need to go into a Wisconsin, a Michigan, or a Pennsylvania and flip one of those states. Flip that around. For Biden, if he can protect those 3 states, call them Midwest, call them Rust Belt, call them Big Ten, even though the Big Ten's in California now, he can probably hold on to the presidency.
Steve, Chuck, before we go, I got the right anchor position. I'm going to now give you the final word. Those are the rules of this broadcast. Final thoughts before we go into this historic debate.
Look, I know a lot of people are looking for fireworks tonight. Look, I think these candidates, one thing to think about here, both campaigns think they're on a track to win now. Just 6 weeks ago, they didn't. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have 2 nervous candidates on that stage who are more risk-averse than we're used to.
All right, Chuck Todd, I want to thank our panel tonight, Chuck Todd, Kristen Welker, Steve Kornacki, Hallie Jackson. We thank you so much. We're going to have so much more coverage as we simulcast this debate, coming to you live from Atlanta. It's going to be a huge night for politics, a huge night for this country, and a huge night for the 2 candidates.
We're live from Georgia, a key battleground state in the race for the White House. In just moments, the current U.S. president will debate the former U.S. president as their parties present.
commercial breaks this evening.
We're going to bring you full analysis here on NBC once the debate is over, but it is about to begin. CNN about to broadcast the presidential debate. Let's listen.
Case to the American people with just over 4 months until Election Day. Good evening, I'm Dana Bash, anchor of CNN's Inside Politics and co-anchor of State of the Union.
I'm Jake Tapper, anchor of CNN's The Lead and co-anchor of State of the Union. Dana and I will co-moderate this evening. Our job is to facilitate a debate between the two candidates tonight. Before we introduce them, we want to share the rules of the debate with the audience at home. Former President Trump will be on the left side of the screen. President Biden will be appearing on the right. A coin toss determined their positions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer a question and 1 minute each for responses and rebuttals. An additional minute for follow-up, clarification, or response is at the moderator's discretion.
When it's time for a candidate to speak, his microphone will be turned on and his opponent's microphone will be turned off. Should a candidate interrupt when his microphone is muted, he will be difficult to understand for viewers at home. At the end of the debate, each candidate will get 2 minutes for closing statements. There is no studio audience tonight. Pre-written notes, props, or contact with campaign staff are not permitted during the debate. By accepting our invitation to debate, both candidates and their campaigns agreed to accept these rules.
Now, please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Folks, how are you? Great to be here. Thank you.
And please welcome the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. Let's begin the debate, and let's start with the issue that voters consistently say is their top concern, the economy. President Biden, inflation has slowed, but prices remain high. Since you took office, the price of essentials has increased. For example, a basket of groceries that cost $100 then now costs more than $120. And typical home prices have jumped more than 30%. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump?
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president and what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. And so what we had to do is try to put things back together again. And that's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out the position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. But there's more to be done. There's more to be done. Working class people are still in trouble. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come of a household where the kitchen table, if the things weren't able to be met during the month, it was a problem. Price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of housing, the price of a whole range of things. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure I deal with those problems. And we're going to make sure that we reduce the price of housing. We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over. The combination, what I was left with in corporate greed, is the reason why we're in this problem right now. In addition to that, we're in a situation where if you take a look at all that was done in his administration, he didn't do much at all. By the time he left, things were in chaos, literally chaos. And so we put things back together. We created, I said, those jobs. We make sure we had a situation where we brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for an insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they can include beginning next year. And the situation is and we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price around the kitchen table.
I think they really pressured him to get everything in under
Thank
the
you,
2
President
minutes,
Trump.
and he's speaking
We had the
way too
greatest
fast.
economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID, and when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
Thank you. President Biden?
Well, look, the greatest economy in the world, he's the only one who thinks that, I think. I don't know anybody else who thinks he had the greatest economy in the world. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that we found ourselves in a situation where his economy, he rewarded the wealthy. He had the largest tax cut in American history, $2 trillion. He raised a deficit larger than any president has in any one term. He's the only president other than Herbert Hoover who's lost more jobs than he had when he began, since Herbert Hoover. The idea that he did something that was significant. And the military, you know, when he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. When he was president, we were still finding ourselves in a position where you had a notion that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have any, this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did.
President Trump, I want to follow up if I can.
You want to respond to him?
Well, I'm going to ask you a follow-up. You can do whatever you want with the minute that we give you. I want to follow up. You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. How will you ensure that that doesn't drive prices even higher?
It's not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cause countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things. But he made a statement. The only thing he was right about is I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. And the jobs went down, and then they bounced back, and he's taking credit for bounce back jobs. You can't do that. He also said he inherited 9% inflation. No, he inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months. And then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing, and they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably the worst administration in history. There's never been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
President Trump, over the last 8 years, under both of your administrations, the national debt soared to record highs. And according to a new nonpartisan analysis, President Trump, your administration approved $8.4 trillion in new debt, while so far, President Biden, you've approved $4.3 trillion in new debt. So, former President Trump, many of the tax cuts that you signed into law are set to expire next year. You want to extend them and go even further, you say. With the U.S. facing trillion-dollar deficits and record debt, why should top earners and corporations pay even less in taxes than they do now?
Because the tax cuts spurred the greatest economy that we've ever seen just prior to COVID. And even after COVID, it was so strong that we were able to get through COVID much better than just about any other country. But we spurred, that tax spurred. Now, when we cut the taxes, as an example, the corporate tax was cut down to 21% from 39%, plus beyond that. We took in more revenue with much less tax, and companies were bringing back trillions of dollars back into our country. The country was going like never before, and we were ready to start paying down debt. We were ready to start using the liquid gold right under our feet, the oil and gas right under our feet. We were going to have something that nobody else has had. We got hit with COVID. We did a lot to fix it. I gave him an unbelievable situation with all of the therapeutics and all of the things that we came up with. We gave him something great. Remember, more people died under his administration, even though we had largely fixed it. More people died under his administration than our administration, and we were right in the middle of it, something which a lot of people don't like to talk about. But he had far more people dying in his administration. He did the mandate, which is a disaster, mandating it. The vaccine went out. He did a mandate on the vaccine, which is the thing that people most objected to about the vaccine. And he did a very poor job, just a very poor job. And I will tell you, not only poor there, but throughout the entire world, we're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership. They don't respect the United States anymore. We're like a third world nation between weaponization of his election, trying to go after his political opponent, all of the things he's done. We've become like a third world nation, and it's a shame. The damage he's done to our country, and I'd love to ask him, and will, why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy our country.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt.
He had the largest national debt of any president in a 4-year period, number one. Number two, that $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our health care system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security. These millions and millions of people coming in, they're trying to put them on Social Security. He will wipe out Social Security. He will wipe out Medicare. So he was right in the way he finished that sentence. And it's a shame. What's happened to our country in the last 4 years is not to be believed. Foreign countries, I'm friends with a lot of people, they cannot believe what happened to the United States of America. We're no longer respected. They don't like us. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people. What we're doing for other countries, and they do nothing for us. What this man has done is absolutely criminal.
Thank you, President Trump. Dana?
This is the first presidential election since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. This morning, the court ruled on yet another abortion case, temporarily allowing emergency abortions to continue in Idaho, despite that state's restrictive ban. Former President Trump, you take credit for the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which returned the issue of abortion to the states.
Correct.
However, the federal government still plays a role in whether or not women have access to abortion pills. They're used in about 2/3 of all abortions. As president, would you block abortion medication?
First of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion pill, and I agree with their decision to have done that, and I will not block it. And if you look at this whole question that you're asking, complex but not really complex. 51 years ago, you had Roe v. Wade, and everybody wanted to get it back to the states. Everybody, without exception. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, everybody wanted it back. Religious leaders. And what I did is I put 3 great Supreme Court justices on the court, and they happened to vote in favor of killing Roe v. Wade and moving it back to the states. This is something that everybody wanted. Now, 10 years ago or so, they started talking about how many weeks and how many this, getting into other things. But every legal scholar throughout the world, the most respected, wanted it brought back to the states. I did that. Now the states are working it out. If you look at Ohio, it was a decision that was an end result that was a little bit more liberal than you would have thought. Kansas, I would say the same thing. Texas is different. Florida is different. But they're all making their own decisions right now. And right now, the states control it. That's the vote of the people. Like Ronald Reagan, I believe in the exceptions. I am a person that believes. And frankly, I think it's important to believe in the exceptions. Some people, you have to follow your heart. Some people don't believe in that. But I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I think
This
it's
is
very
just
important.
sad.
Some people don't. Follow
Trump's
your
not
heart,
saying
but
anything,
you have
and
to get elected
Biden's
also.
losing his
And,
words.
because that
This
has
is
to
a
do with
mess.
other things. You got to get elected. The problem they have is they're radical because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth, if you look at the
This is
former
another
governor of
right-wing
Virginia,
talking point.
he was willing to do this. He said, we'll put the baby aside and we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby. What happened is we brought it back to the states, and the country is now coming together on this issue. It's been a great thing.
Thank you. President Biden?
It's been a terrible thing, what you've done. The fact is that the vast majority of constitutional scholars supported Roe when it was decided. Supported Roe. And that's this idea that they were all against it is just ridiculous. And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks, you don't even know whether you're pregnant or not, but you cannot see a doctor, and have him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states, let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in. They talk about that, but here's the deal: there's a lot of young women who are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Thank you.
There have been many young women murdered by the same people he allows to come across our border. We have a border that's the most dangerous place anywhere in the world, considered the most dangerous place anywhere in the world. And he opened it up, and these killers are coming into our country, and they are raping and killing women. And it's a terrible thing. As far as the abortion is concerned, it is now back with the states. The states are voting. In many cases, it's frankly a very liberal decision. In many cases, it's the opposite. But they're voting, and it's bringing it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted, including the founders, if they knew about this issue, which frankly they didn't. But they would have, everybody wanted it brought back. Ronald Reagan wanted it brought back. He wasn't able to get it. Everybody wanted it brought back, and many presidents had tried to get it back. I was the one to do it. And again, this gives it the vote of the people, and that's where they wanted it. Every legal scholar wanted it that way.
Staying on the topic of abortion, President Biden, 7 states, I'll let you do that. This is the same topic. 7 states have no legal restrictions on how far into a pregnancy a woman can obtain an abortion. Do you support any legal limits on how late a woman should be able to terminate a pregnancy?
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. The first time is between the woman and the doctor. Second time is between the doctor and an extreme situation. The third time is between the doctor, between the woman and the state. The idea that the politicians, that the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. That's the last. No politician should be making that decision. A doctor should be making those decisions. That's how it should be run. That's what you're going to do. And if I'm elected, I'm going to restore Roe v. Wade.
So that means he can take the life of the baby in the 9th month and even after birth, because some states, Democrat run, take it after birth. Again, the former governor of Virginia, put the baby down, then we decide what to do with it. So he's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby. Nobody wants that to happen, Democrat or Republican. Nobody wants it to happen.
I don't think they should have turned
That is
Trump's
simply
mic back
not
on.
true. The Roe v. Wade does not provide for that. That's not the circumstance. Only if a woman's life is in danger, she's going to die. That's the only circumstance in which that can happen. But we are not for late-term abortion, period, period, period.
Under Roe v. Wade, you have late-term abortion. You can do whatever you want, depending on the state. You can do whatever you want. We don't think that's a good thing. We think it's a radical thing. We think the Democrats are the radicals, not the Republicans.
For 51 years, that was the law. 51 years, constitutional scholarship said it was the right way to go. 51 years, and it was taken away because this guy put very conservative members on the Supreme Court. He takes credit for taking it away. What's he going to do? What's he going to do, in fact, if the MAGA Republicans, he gets elected, and the MAGA Republicans control the Congress, and they pass a universal ban on abortion period across the board at 6 weeks or 7 or 8 or 10 weeks, something very, very conservative. Is he going to sign that bill? I'll veto it. He'll sign it.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to the issue of immigration and border security. President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch. Overwhelming border states and overburdening cities such as New York and Chicago, and in some cases causing real safety and security concerns. Given that, why should voters trust you to solve this crisis?
Because we worked very hard to get a bipartisan agreement that not only changed all of that,
Yeah,
we
they
made sure
handled
that
that
we are
perfectly.
in a
They prevented
situation
him from
where
talking
you
further.
had no circumstance where they could come across the border with the number of border police there are now. We significantly increased the number of asylum officers. By the way, the Border Patrol endorsed my position. In addition to that, we found ourselves in a situation where when he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. The border, all he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it. He decided to open up our border, open up our country to people that are from prisons, people that are from mental institutions, insane asylum, terrorists. We have the largest number of terrorists coming into our country right now, all terrorists, all over the world, not just in South America, all over the world. They come from the Middle East, everywhere, all over the world they're pouring in. And this guy just left it open. And he didn't need legislation because I didn't have legislation. I said, close the border. We had the safest border in history. In that final couple of months of my presidency, we had, according to Border Patrol, who is great, and by the way, who endorsed me for president, but I won't say that, but they endorsed me for president. Brandon, just speak to him. But look, we had the safest border in history. Now we have the worst border in history. There's never been anything like it. And people are dying all over the place, including the people that are coming up in caravans.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden?
The only terrorist who's done anything crossing the border is one who came along and killed three, under his administration, killed an Al-Qaeda person come in his administration, killed 3 American soldiers, killed 3 American soldiers. That's the only terrorist that's there. I'm not saying that no terrorist ever got through, but the idea they're emptying their prisons, we're welcoming these people, that's simply not true. There's no data to support what he said. Once again, he's exaggerating, he's lying.
President Trump, staying on the topic of immigration, you've said that you're going to carry out, quote, the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, unquote. Does that mean that you will deport every undocumented immigrant in America, including those who have jobs, including those whose spouses are citizens, and including those who have lived here for decades? And if so, how will you do it?
Just 1 second. He said we killed 3 people. The people we killed are al-Baghdadi and Soleimani, the 2 greatest terrorists, biggest terrorists anywhere in the world, and it had a huge impact on everything, not just border, on everything. He's the one that killed people with the bad water, including hundreds of thousands of people dying, and also killing our citizens when they come in. We are living right now in a rat's nest. They're killing our people in New York, in California, in every state in the union, because we don't have borders anymore. Every state is now a border. And because of his ridiculous, insane, and very stupid policies, people are coming in and they're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen. We call it migrant crime. I call it Biden migrant crime. They're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen before. And you're reading it like these 3 incredible young girls over the last few days. One of them, I just spoke to the mother, and they just had the funeral for this girl, 12 years old. This is horrible what's taken place. What's taken place in our country.
I was just checking
We're
Twitter.
literally an
It's not
uncivilized country now. He doesn't want it to be. He just doesn't know. He opened the borders. Nobody's ever seen anything like. And we have to get a lot of these people out, and we have to get them out fast because they're going to destroy our country. Just take a look at where they're living. They're living in luxury hotels in New York City and other places. our veterans are on the street. They're dying because he doesn't care about our veterans. He doesn't care. He doesn't like the military at all, and he doesn't care about our veterans. Nobody been worse. I had the highest approval rating for veterans taking care of the VA. He has the worst. He's gotten rid of all the things that I approved, choice that I got through Congress, all of the different things I approved, they abandoned. We had by far the highest, and now it's down in less than half because he's done all these great things that we did. And I think he did it just because I approved it, which is crazy. But he has killed so many people at our border by allowing all of these people to come in. And it's a very sad day in America.
President Biden, you have the mic.
Every single thing he said is a lie. Every single one. For example,
Trump
veterans are a hell of a lot
definitely
better off since they passed the PACT Act. 1 million of them now have insurance, and their families have it. Their families have it because what happened, whether it was Agent Orange or burn pits, they're all being covered now. And he opposed, his group opposed that. We're also in a situation where we have great respect for veterans. My son spent a year in Iraq, living right next to one of those burn pits, came back with stage 4 glioblastoma. I was recently in France for D-Day, and I spoke all about those heroes that died. I went to the World War II cemetery, World War I cemetery he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
President Trump?
First of all, that was a made-up quote, suckers and losers. They made it up. It was in a third-rate magazine that's failing, like many of these magazines. He made that up. He put it in commercials. We've notified him. We had 19 people that said I didn't say it. And think of this. Who would say I'm at a cemetery or I'm talking about our veterans? Because nobody's taken better care. I'm so glad this came up, and he brought it up. There's nobody that's taken better care of our soldiers than I have. To think that I would, in front of generals and others, say suckers and losers. We have 19 people that said it was never said by me. It was made up by him, just like Russia was made up, just like the 51 intelligence agents are made up, just like the new thing with the 16 economists are talking. It's the same thing. 51 intelligence agents said that the laptop was Russia disinformation. It wasn't. That came from his son, Hunter. It wasn't Russia disinformation. He made up the suckers and losers, so he should apologize to me right now.
4-star general standing to your side who was on your staff who said you said it, period. That's number one. And number two, the idea that I have to apologize to you for anything along the line. We've done more for veterans than any president has in American history. And they now are in their family. The only sacred obligation we have as a country is to care for our veterans when they come home and their families and equip them when they go to war. That's what we're doing. That's what the VA is doing now. They're doing more for veterans than ever before in our history.
All right, thank you so much.
Let's move to the topic of foreign policy. I want to begin with Russia's war against Ukraine, which is now in its 3rd year. Former President Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he'll only end this war if Russia keeps the Ukrainian territory it has already claimed and Ukraine abandons its bid to join NATO. Are Putin's terms acceptable to you?
First of all, our veterans and our soldiers can't stand this guy. They can't stand him. They think he's the worst commander-in-chief, if that's what you call him, that we've ever had. They can't stand him. So let's get that straight. And they like me more than just about any of them. And that's based on every single bit of information. As far as
Trump's
Russia
going
and
off the
Ukraine,
rails.
if we had a real president, the president that knew, that was respected by Putin, he would have never invaded Ukraine. A lot of people are dead right now, much more than people know. You know, they talk about numbers. You can double those numbers, maybe triple those numbers. He did nothing to stop it. In fact, I think he encouraged Russia from going in. I'll tell you what happened. He was so bad with Afghanistan. It was such a horrible embarrassment, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, that when Putin watched that and he saw the incompetence, that he should have fired those generals, like I fired the one that you mentioned, and so he's got no love lost, but he should have fired those generals. No general got fired for the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, Afghanistan, where we left billions of dollars of equipment behind. We lost 13 beautiful soldiers, and 38 soldiers were obliterated. And by the way, we left people behind, too. We left American citizens behind. When Putin saw that, he said, you know what? I think we're going to go in and maybe take this was his dream. I talked to him about it, his dream. The difference is he never would have invaded Ukraine, never. Just like Israel would have never been invaded in a million years by Hamas. You know why? Because Iran was broke with me. I wouldn't let anybody do business with them. They ran out of money. They were broke. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for anything, no money for terror. That's why you had no terror at all during my administration. This place, the whole world is blowing up under him.
President Biden?
I've never heard so much malarkey in my whole life. Look, the fact of the matter is that we're in a situation where, let's take the last point
Joe
first.
said malarkey, time to drink.
Attacked
I'm just
American
joking.
troops.
I don't know what President Trump was saying.
Caused brain damage for a number
I
of these
genuinely
troops.
don't know.
And he did nothing about it. Recently, not when he was president. They attacked. He said they're just having headaches. That's all it is. He didn't do a thing when the attack took place, number one. Number two, we got over 100,000 Americans and others out of Afghanistan during that airlift. Number three, we found ourselves in a situation where, if you take a look at what Trump did in Ukraine, this guy told Trump, do whatever you want, and do whatever you want. And that's exactly what Trump did to Putin, encourage him, do whatever you want. And he went in. And listen to what he said when he went in. He was going to take Kyiv in 5 days, remember? Because it's part of the old Soviet Union. That's what he wanted to reestablish. Kyiv, and he in fact didn't do it at all. He wasn't able to get it done, and they've lost thousands and thousands of troops, 500,000 troops.
President Trump,
I
as
never
come back
said
to you
that.
for 1 minute, I just want to go back to my original question, which is, are Putin's terms acceptable to you? Keeping the territory in Ukraine?
Acceptable. No, they're not acceptable. But look, this is a war that never should have started. If we had a leader in this war, he led everybody along. He's given $200 billion now or more to Ukraine. He's given $200 billion. That's a lot of money. I don't think there's ever been anything like it. Every time that Zelensky comes to this country, he walks away with $60 billion. He's the greatest salesman ever. And I'm not knocking him. I'm not knocking anything. I'm only saying the money that we're spending on this war, and we shouldn't be spending, it should have never happened. I will have that war settled between Putin and Zelensky as president-elect before I take office on January 20th. I'll have that war settled. People being killed so needlessly, so stupidly, and I will get it settled, and I'll get it settled fast before I take office.
President Biden, you have a minute.
The fact is that Putin is a war criminal. He's killed thousands and thousands of people. And he has made one thing clear. He wants to reestablish what was part of the Soviet Empire, not just a piece. He wants all of Ukraine. That's what he wants. And then you think he'll stop there? Do you think he'll stop when if he takes Ukraine? What do you think happens to Poland? What do you think of Belarus? What do you think happens to those NATO countries? And so if you want a war, you ought to find out what he's going to do, because if in fact he does what he says and walks away, and by the way, all that money we give Ukraine are from weapons we make here in the United States. We give them the weapons, not the money at this point. And our NATO allies have produced as much funding for Ukraine as we have. That's why we're strong.
Thank you. Moving on to the Middle East. In October, Hamas attacked Israel, killing more than 1,000 people and taking hundreds of hostages. Among those held and thought to still be alive are 5 Americans. Israel's response has killed thousands of Palestinians and created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. President Biden,
that was a good answer from Biden.
you've
That
put
was his
forward a
first good moment in a
proposal
half
to
hour.
resolve this conflict, but so far Hamas has not released the remaining hostages, and Israel is continuing its military offensive in Gaza. So what additional leverage will you use to get Hamas and Israel to end the war? You have 2 minutes.
Number one, everyone from the United Nations Security Council straight through to the G7 to the Israelis and Netanyahu himself have endorsed the plan I put forward. Which has 3 stages to it. The first stage is trade the hostages for a ceasefire. Second phase is a ceasefire with additional conditions.
That is true. Trump does look like he has it together. Biden looks old and bumbling. I'm checking Twitter right now.
Number one.
It's
They're the only
bad.
ones standing out. We're still pushing hard to get them to accept. In the meantime, what's happened In Israel, we're trying to say the only thing I've denied Israel was 2,000-pound bombs. They don't work very well in populated areas. They kill a lot of innocent people. We're providing Israel with all the weapons they need and when they need them. And by the way, I'm the guy that organized the world against Iran when they had a full-blown intercontinental ballistic missile attack on Israel. No one was hurt. No one Israeli was accidentally killed, and it just stopped. We saved Israel. We are the biggest producer of support for Israel of anyone in the world. And so there are two different things. Hamas cannot be allowed to be continued. We continue to send our experts and our intelligence people as to how they can get Hamas like we did bin Laden. You don't have to do it. And by the way, they've been greatly weakened, Hamas, greatly weakened, and they should be. They should be eliminated. But you've got to be careful for using certain weapons among population centers.
Just going back to Ukraine for 1 second. We have an ocean separating us. The European nations together have spent $100 billion, or maybe more than that, less than us. Why doesn't he call them and say, you got to put up your money like I did with NATO? I got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. The Secretary General of NATO said Trump did the most incredible job I've ever seen. They wouldn't have any. They were going out of business. We were spending almost 100% of the money was paid by us. He didn't do that. He's getting all. You got to ask these people to put up the money. We're over $100 billion more spent, and it has a bigger impact on them because of location, because we have an ocean in between. You got to ask them. As far as Israel and Hamas, Israel's the one that wants to go. He said the only one who wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
President Biden, you have a minute.
I've never heard so much foolishness. This is a guy who wants to get out of NATO. Are you going to stay in NATO? He's going to pull out of NATO. The idea that we have, our strength lies in our alliances as well. It may be a big ocean, but we're ever able to avoid a war in Europe, a major war in Europe? What happens if, in fact, you have Putin continue to go into NATO? We have an Article 5 agreement. Attack on one is attack on all. You want to start the nuclear war he keeps talking about, go ahead. Let Putin go in and control Ukraine and then move on to Poland and other places. See what happens then. He has no idea what the hell he's talking about. And by the way, I got 50 other nations around the world to support Ukraine, including Japan and South Korea, because they understand that this kind of dislocation has a serious threat to the whole world peace. No major war in Europe has ever been able to be contained just to Europe.
President Trump, just to follow up, would you support the creation of an independent Palestinian state in order to achieve peace in the region?
I'd have to see, but before we do that, the problem we have is that we spend all the money. So they kill us on trade. I made great trade deals with the European nations because if you add them up, they're about the same size economically. Their economy is about the same size as the United States. And they were no cars, they don't want anything that we have, but we're supposed to take their cars, their food, their everything, their agriculture. I changed that. But the big thing I changed is they don't want to pay. And the only reason that he can play games with NATO is because I got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. I said, and he's right about this, I said, no, I'm not going to support NATO if you don't pay. They asked me that question, would you guard us against Russia at a very secret meeting of the 28 states at that time, nations at that time. And they said, no, if you don't pay, I won't do that. And you know what happened? Billions and billions of dollars came flowing in the next day and the next months. But now we're in the same position. We're paying everybody's bills.
Let's turn to the issue of democracy. Former President Trump, I want to ask you about January 6, 2021. After you rallied your supporters that day, some of them stormed the Capitol to stop the constitutionally mandated counting of electoral votes. As president, you swore an oath to, quote, preserve, protect, and defend, unquote, the Constitution. What do you say to voters who believe that you violated that oath through your actions and inaction on January 6th and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I don't think too many believe that. And let me tell you about January 6th. On January 6th, we had a great border. Nobody coming through, very few. On January 6th, we were energy independent. On January 6th, we had the lowest taxes ever. We had the lowest regulations ever. On January 6th, we were respected all over the world. All over the world, we were respected. And then he comes in, and we're now laughed at. We're like a bunch of stupid people. What happened to the United States' reputation under this man's leadership is horrible, including weaponization, which I'm sure at some point you'll be talking about, where he goes after his political opponent because he can't beat him fair and square.
You have 80 seconds left. My question was, what do you say to those voters who believe that you violated your constitutional oath through your actions and inaction on January 6, 2021, and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I didn't say that to anybody. I said peacefully and patriotically. And Nancy Pelosi, if you just watched the news from 2 days ago, on tape to her daughter, who's a documentary filmmaker, they say, but she's saying, oh, no, it's my responsibility. I was responsible for this. Because I offered her 10,000 soldiers or National Guard, and she turned them down. And the mayor in writing, by the way, the mayor, in writing, turned it down, the mayor of D.C. They turned it down. I offered 10,000 because I could see, I had virtually nothing to do. They asked me to go make a speech. I could see what was happening. Everybody was saying they're going to be there on January 6th. They're going to be there. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of people coming. You could feel it. You could feel it, too, and you could feel it. And I said, they ought to have some National Guard or whatever. And I offered it to her. And she now admits that she turned it down. And it was the same day she was, I don't know, she can't be very happy with her daughter because it made her into a liar. She said, I take full responsibility for January 6th.
President Biden?
Look, he encouraged those folks to go up on Capitol Hill, number one. I sat in the dining room off the Oval Office. He sat there for 3 hours watching, begging, being begged by his vice president and a number of his colleagues on the Republican side as well to do something, to call for a stop, to end it. Instead, they talked about these people being patriots and great patrons of America. In fact, he says he'll now forgive them for what they've done. They've been convicted. He says he wants to commute their sentences and say that no. But he went to every single court in the nation. I don't know how many cases, scores of cases, including the Supreme Court, and they said no, this guy is responsible for doing what was done. He did do a damn thing, and these people should be in jail, and they should be the ones who are being held accountable. And he wants to let them all out. And now he says if he loses again, such a whiner that he is, that it could be a bloodbath.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
What they've done to some people that are so innocent, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. What you have done, how you've destroyed the lives of so many people when they ripped down Portland, when they ripped down many other cities. You go to Minnesota,
Oh, good Lord, neither one of them can stay on
what they've done there
topic.
with the fires all over
I
the
hope they
city.
have
If
an
I
ad
didn't bring in
break
the
soon. I
National
could
Guard,
use
that city
one.
would have been destroyed. When you look at all of they took over big chunks of Seattle. I was all set to bring in the National Guard. They heard that, they saw them coming, and they left immediately. What he said about this whole subject is so off. Peacefully patriotic. One other thing. The Unselect Committee, which is basically two horrible Republicans that are all gone now, out of office, and Democrats, all Democrats, they destroyed and deleted all of the information they found because they found out we were right. We were right. And they deleted and destroyed all of the information. They should go to jail for that. If a Republican did that, they'd go to jail.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, I want to give you a minute.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is, what he's telling you is simply not true. The fact is that there was no effort on his part to stop what was going on up in Capitol Hill. And all those people, every one of those who are convicted, deserves to be convicted. The idea that they didn't kill somebody, just went in and broke down doors, broke the windows, occupied offices, turned over desks, turned them over statues. The idea that those people are patriots? Come on. When I asked him the first two debates we had, first time around, I said, will you denounce the Proud Boys? He said, no, I'll tell them to stand by. The idea he's refusing, will you denounce these guys? Will you denounce the people we're talking about now? Will you denounce the people who attacked that Capitol? What are you going to do?
I'm going to give you a minute, President Trump, for a follow-up question I have. After a jury convicted you of 34 felonies last month, you said if reelected, you would, quote, have every right to go after, unquote, your political opponents. You just talked about members of the Select Committee on January 6th going to jail. Your main political opponent is standing on stage with you tonight. Can you clarify exactly what it means about you feeling you have every right to go after your political opponents?
Well, I said my retribution is going to be success. We're going to make this country successful again, because right now it's a failing nation. My retribution is going to be success. But when he talks about a convicted felon, his son is a convicted felon at a very high level. His son is convicted, going to be convicted probably numerous other times. Should have been convicted before, but his Justice Department let the statute of limitations lapse on the most important things. But he could be a convicted felon as soon as he gets out of office. Joe could be a convicted felon with all of the things that he's done. He's done horrible things. All of the death caused at the border, telling the Ukrainian people that we're going to want $1 billion or you change the prosecutor. Otherwise, you're not getting $1 billion. If I ever said that, that's quid pro quo. That we're not going to do anything. We're not going to give you $1 billion unless you change your prosecutor having to do with his son. This man is a criminal. This man, you're lucky.
Yeah, instantly,
you're
Hunter
lucky.
Biden's not running for
wrong.
president.
We
That
have
helps,
a system that was rigged and
I
disgusting.
like
did nothing
non-felons
wrong.
running
Thank
for
you, President Trump.
That's
President
just
Biden, you have said, I'm coming right to you, sir. Well, you want to respond? Go ahead. I'll give you a minute to respond.
The idea that I did anything wrong relative to what you're talking about is outrageous. It's simply a lie, number one. Number two, the idea that you have a right to seek retribution against any American just because you're president is wrong. It's simply wrong. No president's ever spoken like that before. No president in our history has spoken like that before. Number three, the crimes that you are still charged with, and think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give you a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star, number one. Number two, that was a case that was started and moved. They moved a high-ranking official, a DOJ, into the Manhattan DA's office to start that case. That case is going to be appealed and won. We had a very terrible judge, a horrible judge, Democrat. The prosecutor were all high-ranking Democrats, appointed people, and both the civil and the criminal. He basically went after his political opponent because he thought it was going to damage me. But when the public found out about these cases, because they understand it better than he does, he has no idea what these cases are. But when they found out about these cases, you know what they did? My poll numbers went up, way up. You know that because you're reporting it. And we took in more money in the last 2 weeks than we've ever taken in the history of any campaign. I don't think any campaign has ever taken. Hundreds of millions of dollars came pouring in because the public knows it's a scam, and it's a guy that's after his political opponent because he can't win fair and square.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, you have said, quote, Donald Trump and his MAGA Republicans are determined to destroy American democracy. Do you believe that the tens of millions of Americans who are likely to vote for President Trump will be voting against American democracy?
The more they know about what he's done, yes. The more they know about what he's done. And there's a lot more coming. He's got a lot of cases down the road coming around. He's got a whole range of issues he has to face. I don't know what the juries will do, but I do know he has a real problem. And so the fact that, could you ever think you heard any president say that I'm going to seek retribution? Do you ever hear any president say that I thought Hitler had some good ideas? What got me involved to run in the first place after my son had died, I decided in Iraq, because of Iraq, I said I wasn't going to run again until I saw what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. People coming out of the woods carrying swastikas on torches, and singing the same anti-Semitic bile they sang when back in Germany. And the young woman got killed. I spoke to the mother, and they asked him. They said, "What do you think of those people? The people the ones who got killed, the one who tried to stop it, and the ones," he said, "I think they're fine people on both sides." What American president would ever say Nazis coming out of fields carrying torches, singing the same anti-Semitic bile, carrying swastikas were fine people? And this is a guy who says Hitler's done some good things. I'd like to know what they are. The good things Hitler's done, that's what he said. This guy has no sense of American democracy.
President Trump.
Jake, both of you know that story has been totally wiped out because when you see the sentence, it said 100% exoneration on this. So he just keeps it going. He says he ran because of Charlottesville. He didn't run because of Charlottesville. He ran because it was his last chance. He's not equipped to be president. You know it, and I know it. It's ridiculous. We have a debate. We're trying to justify his presidency. His presidency is, without question, the worst president, the worst presidency in the history of our country. We shouldn't be having a debate about it. There's nothing to debate.
I'm not the worst.
He made
You're
up the
worst.
Charlottesville
No,
story,
you are.
and you'll see it's debunked all over the place. Every anchor has, every reasonable anchor has debunked it. And just the other day, it came out where it was fully debunked. It's a nonsense story. He knows that, and he didn't run because of Charlottesville. He used that as an excuse to run.
President Biden?
And debunked. It happened. All you have to do is listen to what was said at the time. And the idea that somehow that's the only reason I ran. I ran because I was worried a guy like this guy could get elected. If he thought they were good people coming out of that forest, carrying those woods, carrying those torches, then he didn't deserve to be president. Didn't deserve to be president at all. And the idea that he's talking about all this being fabricated, we saw with our own eyes. We saw what happened on January 6th. We saw the people breaking through the windows. We saw people occupying his own vice president. Look, there's a reason why 40 of his 44 top cabinet officers refused to endorse him this time. His vice president hasn't endorsed him this time. So why? Why? They know him well. They serve with him. Why are they not endorsing him?
Thank you, President Biden. We're going to be right back with more from the CNN presidential debate.
So we have another half hour to go, I think, after this commercial break. Oh, I needed a break. That came at the right moment. I needed a break. Oh my goodness. Let's stand up and stretch, everybody. Oh. Good stretch. So it's a 90-minute debate where they're probably going to do a 4.5-minute, ad break, and there's supposed to be another one. So we start at 9. It's 9:52 right now. So we've got at least another half hour, 45 minutes to go. So. Joe Biden's on the struggle bus. I've been reading Twitter along the way while we're doing this ad break, and yeah, the narrative is already not going in a Biden-friendly direction. So it's yeah. It's not going well. Like, for Biden. I mean, I have to say, as much as it's sad to see, like, Trump is at least doing the typical Trump shtick, and, you know, he looks like he's got it a little bit more together than Joe. Although, Joe has started to get in a couple good zingers, which is very helpful. But the social media narrative is already, Joe looks old, Trump sounds better, our median voter is gonna care, you know, sort of thing. So I worry. Although it is funny, there are some people who are already stitching some side-by-sides of Trump, of stuff that Trump says he didn't say, that he definitely said, which I think is interesting. But yeah, and the people I follow on Twitter are definitely more liberal, and even they're being like, yeah, this isn't going
front lines are
well.
still very active. This is
So-
like quicksand, and officials say an entire town is cut off.
This close to actually understand why people had to jump in the ocean.
News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
Nearly a dozen hours after the eye roared ashore.
Yeah.
There is some late breaking news. I'm Lester Holt with Savannah Guthrie. You're watching the first presidential debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump.
It's being hosted by CNN. At the conclusion of this debate in about 40 minutes, hope you'll join us for analysis of tonight's key moments.
Our team of political experts will break down how the night could shake up the presidential race over the next 5 months. That's all ahead right here on NBC.
Live from Georgia. Let's talk about persistent challenges you both faced in your first terms and you'd certainly face again in a second term. President Biden, while black unemployment dropped to a record low under your presidency, black families still earn far less than white families. Black mothers are still 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes, and black Americans are imprisoned at 5 times the rate of white Americans.
I think partly
What do you
that's
say
the
to black
time of
voters
day.
who are disappointed that you haven't made more
This
progress?
was scheduled at 9
He
p.m. to
acknowledged he
accommodate
made a
the
lot of
West
progress,
Coast,
number
and
one.
let's face
Fact
it,
of
this
the
is
matter
past
is
Joe
more
Biden's
small black
bedtime.
businesses that have been started than any time in history. Number 2, the wages of black unemployment is the lowest level it's been in a long, long time. Number 3, we're providing housing for black Americans and dealing with the segregation that exists among these corporations that collude to keep people out of their houses. And in addition to that, we find that the impact on the choice that black families have to make relative to child care is incredibly difficult. When we did the first major piece of legislation in the past, I was able to reduce black child care costs. I cut them in half. We got to make sure we provide for child care costs. We got to make sure, because when you provide those child care protections, you increase economic growth because more people can be in the job market. So there's more to be done, considerably more to be done. But we've done a great deal so far, and I'm not letting up, and they know it.
You have 49 seconds left. What do you say to black voters who are disappointed with the progress so far?
I say I don't blame them for being disappointed. Inflation is still hurting them badly. For example, I provided for the idea that any black family, first-time home buyer, should get a $10,000 tax credit to be able to buy their first home so they can get started. I made sure that we're in a situation where all those black families and those black individuals who had to take out student loans that were ballooning, that if they were engaged in nursing, doctor, and anything having to do with volunteerism, if they paid their bills for 10 years on their student debt, all the rest is forgiven after 10 years. Millions have benefited from that, and we're going to do a whole lot more for black families.
Thank you, President Trump.
And he caused the inflation. He's blaming inflation, and he's right, it's been very bad. He caused the inflation, and it's killing black families and Hispanic families and just about everybody. It's killing people. They can't buy groceries anymore. They can't. You look at the cost of food where it's doubled and tripled and quadrupled. They can't live. They're not living anymore. He caused this inflation. I gave him a country with essentially no inflation. It was perfect. It was so good. All he had to do is leave it alone. He destroyed it with his Green New Scam and all this money that's being thrown out the window. He caused inflation. As sure as you're sitting there, the fact is that his big kill on the black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. They're taking black jobs, and they're taking Hispanic jobs, and you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to see something that's going to be the worst in our history.
Thank you. President Biden?
There was no inflation when I became president. You know why? The economy was flat on its back. 15% unemployment. He decimated the economy, absolutely decimated the economy. That's why there was no inflation at the time. There were no jobs. We provided thousands of millions of jobs for individuals who are in all communities, including minority communities. We made sure that they have health insurance. We have covered, if the ACA has increased, I made sure that they're $8,000 per person in a family to get written off for health care. But this guy wants to eliminate that. They tried 50 times. He wants to get rid of the ACA again, and they're going to try again if they win. You find ourselves in a position where the idea that we're not doing any, I've put more We put more police on the street than any administration has. He wants to cut the cops. We're providing for equity and making sure people have a shot to make it. There's a lot going on, but in inflation, he caused it by his tremendous malfeasance in the way he handled the pandemic.
Thank you. Another persistent challenge is the climate crisis. 2023 was the hottest year in recorded history, and communities across the country are confronting the devastating effects of extreme heat, intensifying wildfires, stronger hurricanes, and rising sea levels. Former President Trump, you've vowed to end your opponent's climate initiatives, but will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
Well, let me just go back to what he said about the police, how close the police are to him. Almost every police group in the nation from every state is supporting Donald J. Trump. Almost every police group. And what he's done to the black population is horrible, including the fact that for 10 years he called them super predators. We can't, in the 1990s, we can't forget that. Super predators was his name, and he called it to them for 10, and they've taken great offense at it, and now they see it happening. But when they see what I did for criminal justice reform and for the historically black colleges and universities, where I funded them and got them all funded, and the opportunity zones with Tim, as you know, Tim Scott was incredible. He did a great job, great senator from South Carolina. He came to me with the idea, and it was a great idea. It's one of the most successful economic development acts ever in the country, opportunity zones. And the biggest beneficiary are blacks. And that's why we have the best numbers with them in maybe ever. They're saying ever. I read this morning where ever, the best numbers. He's lost much of the black population because he's done a horrible job for black people. He's also done a horrible job for Hispanics. But wait till you see these millions of people pouring into our country, and they're going to take the jobs, and it's already started, and you haven't seen anything yet. It's a disaster.
38 seconds left. President Trump, will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
So
yeah,
I want
totally didn't address the question at all.
Clean water, and I want absolutely clean air, and we had it. We had H2O. We had the best numbers ever, and we were using all forms of energy, all forms, everything. And yet, during my 4 years, I had the best environmental numbers ever. And my top environmental people gave me that statistic just before I walked on the stage, actually.
I don't know where the hell he's been. The idea that anything he said is true. I've passed the most extensive climate change legislation in history. We find ourselves, and by the way, black colleges. I came up with $15 billion for HBCUs, historic black universities.
No, Trump's not going to address climate change. That's a GOP.
Kind of contributors
that's dead on arrival with the GOP. No one takes that seriously.
These laboratories and the like. Any black student is capable in college of doing any white student can do. They just don't have the money. But now they'll be able to get those jobs in high tech. We're in a situation where the idea that he is claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water, he hadn't done a damn thing for the environment. He pulled out of the Paris Peace Accord, Climate Accord. I immediately joined it because if we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius at any one point, there's no way back. The only existential threat to humanity is climate change, and he didn't do a damn thing about it. He must undo all that I've done.
The Paris Accord was going to cost us $1 trillion, and China nothing, and Russia nothing, and India nothing. It was a ripoff of the United States.
They're already
and I ended it
Twitter.
because I didn't want to waste that money because they treat us horribly. We were the only ones. It was costing us money. Nobody else was paying into it, and it was a disaster. But everything that he said just now, I'll give you an example. I heard him say before insulin. I'm the one that got the insulin down for the seniors. I took care of the seniors. What he's doing is destroying all of our medical programs because the migrants coming in, they want everybody. And look, I have the biggest heart on the stage, I guarantee you that. And I want to take care of people. But we're destroying our country. They're taking over our schools, our hospitals, and they're going to be taking over Social Security. He is destroying Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
I am refusing to rehab the Bernie primary.
The idea is that
I'm not going
we,
there.
in fact, we were the only ones of consequence
And you want to talk about
We're not
age? Bernie's
members
older
of the
than
Paris Accord.
Biden.
How can we do anything? We're not able to, the United States can't get its pollution under control. One of the largest polluters in the world, number one. We're making significant progress. By 2035, we will have cut pollution in half. We have made significant progress, and we're continuing to make progress. We set up a climate corps for thousands of young people to learn how to deal with climate, just like the Peace Corps. And we're moving in directions that are going to significantly change the elements of cause of pollution. But the idea that he claims that he has the biggest heart up here and he's really concerned about pollution and about climate, I've not seen any
CNN
indication
can't get
of
their
that.
graphics
And
right.
by the way, with regard to prescription drugs, one company agreed that they would reduce the price to $35, which I was calling for, one, voluntarily. I made sure every company in the world, every pharmaceutical company, cannot have to pay.
Thank you.
And by the way,
So every day, millions of Americans struggle just to make ends meet. For many older Americans, Social Security provides a critical lifeline. President Biden, if nothing is done to Social Security, seniors will see their benefits cut in just over 10 years. Will you name tonight one specific step that you're willing to take to keep Social Security solvent?
yes, make the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Right now, everybody making under $170,000 pays 6% of their income, of their paycheck, every single time they get a paycheck from the time of the first one they get when they're 18 years old. The idea that they're going to, I'm proposing that everybody, the millionaires pay 1%. 1%. So no one I would not raise the cost of Social Security for anybody under $400,000. After that, I began to make the wealthy begin to pay their fair share by increasing from 1% beyond to be able to guarantee the program for life.
So you still have 82 seconds left. Are there any other measures that you think that would be able to help keep Social Security solvent, or is that one enough?
Well, no, that one enough will keep it solvent. But the biggest thing I'll do if we defeat this man, because he wants to get rid of Social Security. He thinks there's plenty to cut in Social Security. He's wanting to cut Social Security and Medicare, both times. And and if you look at the program put forward by the House Republican caucus that I believe supports, is in fact want to cut it as well. The idea that we don't need to protect our seniors is ridiculous. And by the way, the American public has greater health care coverage today than ever before. And on the ACA, as I said, you're in a circumstance where 400,000 people, 40 million people would not have insurance because they have a pre-existing condition. Only thing that allows them to have that insurance is the fact that they, in fact, are part of the ACA. And by the way, the other thing is, we're in a situation where we talk about education for black communities. I've raised the amount of money for Pell Grants, another $8,000. So anybody making under $70,000 a year is going to be able to get $15,000 toward their tuition.
Why can neither of these two stay on topic?
Thank you, President
My
Biden.
brain
President
is
Trump.
starting to hurt.
So I've dealt with politicians all my life. I've been on this side of the equation for the last 8 years. I've never seen anybody lie like this guy. He lies. I've never seen it. He could look you in the face. About so many other things too.
That's
and
rich
we
coming
mentioned the
from
laptop.
Trump.
We mentioned Russia, Ukraine. Everything he does is a lie. It's misinformation and disinformation. The losers and suckers story that he made up is a total lie on the military. It's a disgrace. But Social Security, he's destroying it because millions of people are pouring into our country, and they're putting them onto Social Security. They're putting them onto Medicare, Medicaid. They're putting them in our hospitals. They're taking the place of our citizens. What they're doing to the VA, to our veterans, is
the great
unbelievable. Our
replacement
veterans
theory
are living in
talking
the street,
point.
and these
Yes,
people are
yes.
living in luxury hotels. He doesn't know what he's doing, and it's really coming back. I've never seen such anger in our country before.
President Biden?
The idea that veterans are not being taken care of, I told you before. And by the way, when I said suckers and losers, he acknowledged after that he fired that general. That general got fired because he's the one that acknowledged that that's what he said. He was the one standing with Trump when he said it, number one. Number two, the idea that we're going to be in a situation where all these millions and millions, the way he talks about it, illegal aliens are coming into the country and taking away our jobs. There's a reason why we have the fastest growing economy in the world, the reason why we have the most successful economy in the world. We're doing better than any other nation in the world. And by the way, those 15 Nobel laureates he talked about being phony, those 15 Nobel laureates, economists, they all said that if Trump is reelected, we're likely to have a recession and inflation is going to increasingly go up. And by the way, worst president in history, 159 presidential scholars voted him the worst president in the history of the United States of America.
President Biden, thank you so much. Let's turn to the cost of child care, which many American families struggle to afford. President Trump, both you and President Biden have tried to address this issue, but the average cost of child care in this country has risen to more than $11,000 a year per child. For many families, the cost of child care for 2 children is more than their rent. In your second term, what would you do to make child care more affordable?
Just to go back, the general got fired because he was no good. And if he said that, that's why he made it up. But we have 19 people that said I didn't say it, and they're very highly respected, much more so than him. The other thing is, he doesn't fire people. He never fired people. I've never seen him fire anybody. I did fire a lot. I fired Comey because he was no good. I fired a lot of the top people at the FBI, drained the swamp. They were no good. Not easy to fire people. You pay a price for it, but they were no good. I inherited these people. I didn't put them there. I didn't put Comey there. He was no good. I fired him. This guy hasn't fired anybody. He never fires. He should have fired every military man that was involved with that the Afghanistan horror show, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. He didn't fire. Did you fire anybody? Did you fire anybody that's on the border that's allowed us to have the worst border in the history of the world? Did anybody get fired for allowing 18 million people, many from prisons, many from mental institutions? Did you fire anybody that allowed our country to be destroyed? Joe, our country is being destroyed as you and I sit up here and waste a lot of time on this debate. This shouldn't be a debate. He is the worst president. He just said about me because I said it. But look, he's the worst president in the history of our country. He's destroyed our country. Now all of a sudden he's trying to get a little tough on the border. He came out with a nothing deal, and it reduced it a little bit, like this much. It's insignificant.
No, nobody's on topic. I was just saying that. Neither one of them can stay on a topic. We're all over the board. Trump completely missed the Social Security question. That just wasn't addressed. We're stuck back on immigration.
Our country doesn't have
and unfortunately, I think the sad thing is Trump is setting the narrative and Biden's trying to chase after him. And that puts Biden in a defensive position, which is not where you want to be. You want to be on the offensive.
President Biden?
We are the most admired country in the world. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity. We have the finest military in the history of the world, the finest in the history of the world. No one thinks we're weak. No one wants to screw around with us. Nobody, number one. Number two, the idea that we're talking about worst presidents. I wasn't joking. Look it up or go online. 159 or 58, don't hold me the exact number, presidential historians, they've had meetings and they voted who's the worst president in American history, one through best to worst. They said he was the worst in all of American history. That's a fact. That's not
He managed to be worse than James K. Polk. Now that is an accomplishment.
The idea that he is doing anything to deal with child care. He did virtually nothing to child care. We should significantly increase the child care tax credit. We should significantly increase the availability of women and men or single parents to be able to go back to work. And we should encourage businesses to have.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, the question was about what would you do to make child care more affordable, if you want to take your minute.
Just so you understand, we have polling, we have other things that they rate him the worst because what he's done is so bad. And they rate me, I'll show you, I will show you, and they rate me one of the best, okay? And if I'm given another 4 years, I will be the best. I think I'll be the best. Nobody's ever created an economy like us. Nobody's ever cut taxes like us. He's the only one I know. He wants to raise your taxes by 4 times. He wants to raise everybody's taxes by 4 times. He wants the Trump tax cuts to expire. So everybody, including the two of you, are going to pay 4 to 5 times. Nobody ever heard of this before. All my life, I'd grow up and I'd see politicians talking about cutting taxes. When we cut taxes, as I said, we did more business. Apple and all these companies, they were bringing money back into our country. The worst president in history by far, and everybody knows it.
President Biden?
Look, the fact of the matter is that he's dead wrong about. He's increased the tariff. He will increase the taxes on middle-class people. I said I'd never raise the tax on anybody making less than $400,000. I didn't. But this tariff is 10% tariffs. Everything coming into the country, you know what the economists say? That's going to cost the average American $2,500 a year more, because they're going to have to pay the difference in food and all the things that are important. Number two, he's in a situation where he talks about how he has not raised, he's somehow helped the middle class. The middle class have been devastated by you. Now you want a new tax cut of $5 trillion over the next 10 years, which is going to fundamentally bankrupt the country. You have the largest deficit of any president in American history, number one. Number two, you have not, in fact, made any contact, any progress with China. We are the lowest trade deficit with China since 2010.
Thank you, President Biden.
You lost.
Thank you, President Biden. Let's discuss an epidemic impacting millions of Americans that both of you have made a top priority in your first term, the opioid crisis. And for both of you, the number of overdose deaths in this country has gone up. Under your term, it went up. Under your term, it has gone up. Former President Trump, despite the efforts that both of you have made, more than 100,000 Americans are dying from overdoses every year, primarily from fentanyl and other opioids. What will you do to help Americans right now in the throes of addiction who are struggling to get the treatment they need?
This should be good.
To finish up, we now have the largest deficit in the history of our country under this guy. We have the largest deficit with China. He gets paid by China. He's a Manchurian candidate. He gets money from China. So I think he's afraid to deal with them or something. But do you notice he never took out my tariffs, because we bring in so much money with the tariffs that I imposed on China. He never took them away. He can't, because it's too much money. It's tremendous. And we saved our steel industries, and there was more to come, but he hasn't done that. But he hasn't cut the tariffs because he can't, because it's too much money. But he's got the largest deficit in the history of our country, and he's got the worst situation with China. China's going to own us if you keep allowing them to do what they're doing to us as a country. They are killing us as a country, Joe, and you can't let that happen. You're destroying our country.
It is really good, though. Stars Angela.
So, President Trump, you have 67 seconds left. The question was, what are you going to do to help Americans in the throes of addiction right now who are struggling to get the treatment they need?
Jake, we were doing very well at addiction until the COVID came along. We had the 2.5, almost 3 years of like nobody's ever had before, any country, in every way. And then we had to get tough, and it was the drugs pouring across the border it started to increase. We got great equipment. We bought the certain dog that's the most incredible thing that you've ever seen, the way they can spot it. We did a lot, and we were getting very low numbers, very, very low numbers. Then he came along. The numbers, have you seen the numbers now? It's not only the 18 million people that I believe is even low, because the gotaways, they don't even talk about gotaways. But the numbers of the amount of drugs and human trafficking in women coming across our border, the worst thing I've ever seen, at numbers that nobody's ever seen under him, because the border's so bad. But the number of drugs coming across our border now is the largest we've ever had by far.
President Trump, thank you. President Biden?
Fentanyl and the byproducts of fentanyl went down for a while. And I wanted to make sure we use the machinery that can detect fentanyl, these big machines that roll over everything that comes across the border. And it costs a lot of money. That was part of this deal we put together, this bipartisan deal. More fentanyl machines, more being able to detect drugs, more numbers of agents, more numbers of all the people at the border. And when we had that deal done, he called his Republican colleagues, said, "Don't do it. It's going to hurt me politically." No, he never argued it's not a good bill. It's a really good bill. We need those machines. We need those machines. And we're coming down very hard in every country in Asia in terms of precursors for fentanyl. And Mexico is working with us to make sure they don't have the technology to be able to put it together. That's what we have to do. We need those machines.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, and again, the question is about Americans in the throes of addiction right now, struggling to get the treatment they need.
Well, because this does pertain to it. He ended Remain in Mexico. He ended catch and release. I made it catch and release in Mexico, not catch and release here. We had so many things that we had done, hard negotiations with Mexico, and I got it all for nothing. It's just like when you have a hostage. We always pay $6 billion for a hostage. Every time we say a hostage. Now we have a hostage, a Wall Street Journal reporter. I think a good guy. And he's over there because Putin is laughing at this guy, probably asking for billions of dollars for the reporter. I will have him out very quickly as soon as I take office. Before I take office, I said by literally as soon as I win the election, I will have that reporter out. He should have had him out a long time ago, but Putin's probably asking for billions and billions of dollars because this guy pays it every time. We had 2 cases where we paid $6 billion for 5 people. I got 58 people out, and I paid essentially nothing.
Thank you, President Trump. Dana?
Let's turn to concerns that voters have about each of you. President Biden, you would be 86 at the end of your 2nd term. How do you address concerns about your capability to handle the toughest job in the world well into your 80s?
Well, first of all, I spent half my career being criticized being the youngest person in politics. I was the 2nd youngest person ever elected to the United States Senate, and now I'm the oldest. This guy's 3 years younger and a lot less competent. I think that just look at the record. Look at what I've done. Look how I've turned around the horrible situation he left me. As I said, 15 million new jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, more investment in America, over billions of dollars in private investment in enterprises that we are growing. By the way, we brought an awful lot of people. The whole idea of computer chips, we used to have 40% of the market. We invented those chips, and we lost it because he was sending people to find the cheapest jobs overseas and to bring home a product. So I went to South Korea. I convinced Samsung to invest billions of dollars here in the United States. And guess what? Those fabs, they call to build these chips, those fabs pay over $100,000. You don't need a college degree for them. And there's billions, about $40 billion already being invested and being built right now in the United States, creating significant jobs for Americans from all over the world.
President Biden, you have 40 seconds left. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. The idea that somehow we are this failing country. I never heard a president talk like this before. We're the envy of the world. Name me a single major country president who wouldn't trade places with the United States of America for all our problems and all our opportunities. We're the most progressive country in the world in getting things done. We're the strongest country in the world. We're a country in the world who keeps our word, and everybody trusts us, all of our allies, and those who he coddles up to, from Kim Jong-un, he sends love letters to, and Putin, etc. They don't want to screw around with us.
Thank you. Former President Trump, to follow up, you would be 82 at the end of your 2nd term. What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know. We made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions, he couldn't do it. But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way. And I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was
Rumor
willing
has
to
it
take
Trump's
a
on the
cognitive test.
Ozempic.
And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced him. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy when he was White House doctor. And then I took another one, a similar one. And one of them said they've never seen anybody ace him.
Thank you. President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's what anyway, just take a look at what he says he is, and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way,
we're not comparing golf scores on national television, are we? Oh no, wait, we are. We definitely are.
That's the biggest driver. He's a 6 handicap of all.
American politics are broken.
But I have, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay, let's
not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to turn
Let's not act like children.
to a specific concern that voters have about you. Will you pledge tonight that once all legal challenges have been exhausted, that you will accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins, and you will say right now that political violence in any form is unacceptable?
Well, I shouldn't have to say that, but of course I believe that. It's totally unacceptable. And if you would see my statements that I made on Twitter at the time, and also my statement that I made in the Rose Garden, you would say it's one of the strongest statements you've ever seen. In addition to the speech I made in front of, I believe, the largest crowd I've ever spoken to, and I will tell you, nobody ever talks about that. They talk about a relatively small number of people that went to the Capitol, and in many cases were ushered in by the police. And as Nancy Pelosi said, it was her responsibility, not mine. She said that loud and clear. But the answer is, if the election is fair, free, and I want that more than anybody. And I'll tell you something. I wish he was a great president, because I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be at one of my many places enjoying myself. I wouldn't be under indictment because I wouldn't have been his political opponent, because he indicted me because I was his opponent. I wish he was a great president. I would rather have that. I wouldn't be here. I don't mind being here. But the only reason I'm here is he's so bad as a president that I'm going to make America great again. We're going to make America great again. We're a failing nation right now. We're a seriously failing nation. And we're a failing nation because of him. His policies are so bad. His military policies are insane. They're insane. These are wars that will never end with him. He will drive us into World War III, and we're closer to World War III than anybody can imagine. We are very, very close to World War III, and he's driving us there. And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him. They don't fear him. They have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III.
You want a World War III, let him follow and win, and let Putin say, do what you want, NATO. Just do what you want. There's a thing called Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all, and required response. The idea, I can't think of a single
I foolishly had
leader in the
hope.
world.
I mean, I knew Trump would do his Trump thing. I was hoping Biden would really come out and
we have
do a
wonderful
good
people
job.
because of the people, not me. It's because of the American people. They're capable of anything, and they step up when they're needed.
I mean, the social media narrative is already not in
needed
his
to protect the
favor.
world
and
because they are safety.
That's not
And
good.
again, you want to have a war, just let Putin go ahead and take Kyiv, make sure they move on, see what happens in Poland, Hungary, and other places along that border. Then you have a war.
President Trump, as I come back to you for a follow-up, the question was, will you accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins?
Just to finish what he said, if I might, Russia, they took a lot of land from Bush. They took a lot of land from Obama and Biden. They took no land, nothing from Trump, nothing. He knew not to do it. He's not going to play games with me. He knew that. I got along with him very well, but he knew not to play games. He took nothing from me. But now he's going to take the whole thing from this man right here. That's a war that should have never started. It would have never started ever with me. And he's going to take Ukraine. And, you know, you asked me a question before, would you do this? He's got us in such a bad position right now with Ukraine and Russia, because Ukraine's not winning that war. He said, I will never settle until such time. They're running out of people. They're running out of soldiers. They've lost so many people. It's so sad. They've lost so many people, and they've lost those gorgeous cities with the golden domes that are 1,000 years old, all because of him and stupid decisions.
I think it's whatever.
Russia
I
would
mean,
never
it's going to be a
attack.
tough 4 years,
President Trump, the
regardless of
question
who's in
was,
office.
will you
But I
accept
mean,
the
4
results
more
of the
years of
election,
Trump is
regardless of who wins? Yes or no, please?
If it's a fair and legal and good election, absolutely. I would have much rather accepted these, but the fraud and everything else was ridiculous. And if you want, we'll have a news conference on it in a week, or we'll have another one of these in a week. But I will absolutely, there's nothing I'd rather do. It would be much easier for me to do that than I'm running again. I wasn't really going to run until I saw the horrible job he did. He's destroying our country. I would be very happy to be someplace else, in a nice location someplace. And again, no indictments, no political opponent stuff, because it's the only way he thinks he can win. But unfortunately, it's driven up my numbers and driven them up to a very high level because the people understand it.
Well, let's see what your numbers are when this election is over. Let's see.
I mean,
you're a whiner.
I will say that
the
narrative on Twitter has definitely shifted, which I think is interesting. I think Biden has regained some ground, which is good.
In America said any of your claims had any merit, state or local, none. But you continue to provoke this lie about somehow there's all this misrepresentation, all this stealing. There is no evidence of that at all. And I tell you what, I doubt whether you'll accept it because you're such a whiner. The idea if you lose again, you accepting anything, you can't stand the loss. Something snapped in you when you lost the last time.
We'll be right back with more from the CNN presidential debate, live from Georgia.
Oh. No, I mean, there is something to that. Like, yeah, Biden's old, he's a bit doddering. He definitely had a very slow start. And he's gotten better as time has gone on. I think he's still that comfortable sedan, as Chuck Todd put it, 7 years ago. He's still the comfortable sedan. And I think that's helpful, I think that's, he is making solid policy points. Trump just seems blusterous. I think both sides are gonna walk away from this disappointed. Democrats are they've already self-flagellated on Twitter. Democrats are gonna claim the sky is falling. Republicans are gonna claim that Trump has been everything, done everything, all this type of thing. Like, I think everyone leaves from this deeply dissatisfied, which ironically kind of makes the September debate have higher stakes, weirdly enough. So, yeah. That conversation needed to happen about 1.5 years ago. So, someone in chat mentions it too late to trade him in.
News
and it's like, that time has come and gone.
News is more now.
That conversation was a while ago. Although that did not stop people from calling me frantically, earlier this year, being like, well, we could still get rid of him if we do this, this, and this. And it's like, that time has passed.
The future is now.
That time has passed.
Is NBC News Now.
We're stuck with. And we've got to move forward.
I'm Lester Holt with Savannah Guthrie. You're watching the first presidential debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump.
It's being hosted by CNN, and at the conclusion of this debate, in less than 10 minutes or so, we're hoping you'll join us for analysis of tonight's key moments.
Our team of political experts will break down how this night could shake up the presidential race over the next 5 months. Back to Atlanta now.
Candidates to deliver their closing statements as predetermined by a coin toss. We're going to begin with you, President Biden. You have 2 minutes.
We've made significant progress from the debacle that was left by President Trump in his last term. We find ourselves in a situation where, number one, we have to make sure that we have a fair tax system. I ask anyone out there in the audience or anyone out watching this debate, do you think the tax system is fair? The fact is that I said nobody even making under $400,000 had a single penny increase in their taxes and will not. And if I'm reelected, that'll be the case again. But this guy has increased your taxes because of the deficit, number one. He's increased inflation because of the debacle he left after the way he handled the pandemic. And he finds himself in a position where he now wants to tax you more by putting a 10% tariff on everything that comes into the United States of America. What I did, when, for example, he wants to get away with, get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. Well, guess what? We got it down to $35 for insulin instead of $400. No more than $2,000 for every senior, no matter how much prescription they need. You know what that did? That reduced the federal debt by $160 billion over 10 years because the government doesn't have to pay the exorbitant prices. I'm going to make that available to every senior all along, it's happening now, and everybody in America. He wants to get rid of that. I'm going to make sure that we have child care. We're going to significantly increase the credits people have for child care. I'm going to make sure we do something about what we're doing on lead pipes and all the things that are causing health problems for people across the country. We're going to continue to fight to bring down inflation and give people a break.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, you now have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Like so many politicians, this man is just a complainer. He said, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to get rid of this tax, that tax. But he doesn't do anything. All he does is make our country unsafe by allowing millions and millions of people to go in. Our military doesn't respect him. We look like fools in Afghanistan. We didn't stop Israel. It was such a horrible thing that would have never happened. It should have never happened. Iran was broke. Anybody that did business with Iran, including China, they couldn't do business with the United States. They all passed. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah, for terror, no money whatsoever. Again, Ukraine should have never happened. He talks about all this stuff, but he didn't do it. For 3.5 years, we're living in hell. We have the Palestinians and we have everybody else rioting all over the place. You talk about Charlottesville. This is 100 times Charlottesville, 1,000 times. The whole country is exploding because of you, because they don't respect you, and they have to respect their president, and they don't respect you throughout the world. What we did was incredible. We rebuilt the military. We got the largest tax cut in history, the largest regulation cut in history. The reason he's got jobs is because I cut the regulations that gave jobs, but he's putting a lot of those regulations back on. All of the things that we've done, nobody's never seen anything like. Even from a medical standpoint, right to try, where we can try space-age materials instead of going to Asia or going to Europe and trying to get when you're terminally ill. Now you can go and you can get something. You sign a document. They've been trying to get it for 42 years. But you know what we did for the military was incredible. Choice for our soldiers, where our soldiers, instead of waiting for 3 months to see a doctor, can go out and get themselves fixed up and readied up and take care of themselves, and they're living. And that's why I had the highest approval rating in the history of the VA. So all of these things, we're in a failing nation, but it's not going to be failing anymore. We're going to make it great again.
Thank you, former President Trump, President Biden. Stay with us because we have full analysis of this debate. Anderson Cooper and Aaron Burnett starts now on CNN.
So we've been watching the wrap-up there of the debate. Former President Trump
Raise your
making his
hand
closing
if that was
statement, wrapping up
painful.
the first presidential debate hosted by CNN with Mr. Trump
That
facing
was
off against President Biden.
The two men debated for about an hour and 40 minutes or so and clashed repeatedly on the major topics of the day,
I'm just
including
checking
economy,
Twitter
abortion,
right now,
immigration,
and
childcare, Social Security, and
I
of
think
course,
it ended
the
on a
key
really good
issue,
note,
the competence of
but
both
nobody
men,
seemed to
both
be able
one
to
of the
stay
oldest
on
presidents
topic.
in history, if elected.
Let's shut
the
up
candidates
these
also
folks
traded
for
several
a minute.
personal.
And let me switch back to the main view. So that was that was tough. I mean, neither one of them could stay on topic, which was just a laugh a minute. Nobody could manage to stay on topic. It was tough. It was a tough debate all around. Biden started slow. He got better as time went on, but it was still very tough. Trump did his typical Trump thing that he always does. One of the things I saw on Twitter were people talking about the lack of fact checking by the moderators of different Trump lies and all this type of thing. And so that was a big problem. This comment from the chat, that is true, and there were two specific instances of that. One was Israel-Palestine. They both dodged criticizing Israel for anything, and Biden notably did not address people who are unhappy about our response in Gaza and the whole Genocide Joe thing. But Trump did not address Social Security in any meaningful way. And his plans for saving it, fixing it, whatever he wants to do, with that completely ignored all of that. And yeah, I mean, it was a typical, if they didn't like the question or didn't like the topic or whatever have you, it was simply dodged. And that definitely was very, very, very frustrating to watch. Yeah, chat, global warming, absolutely. Neither side really. The only thing Biden brought up was he passed the biggest piece of climate change legislation, and Trump left the Paris Accord, and then immediately veered off topic. Like, this was every question. It was something sort of thing. Dana Bash, it took her 3 times to get Trump to say he would agree to the results of the 2024 election, and he modified it so much he gave himself every out so he doesn't have to, because he didn't want to address it. I mean, so it was just throughout. It was just, I said at one point, I don't know if people could hear over the broadcast or anything, but I was just kind of like, this was a sad night for American politics. I'm just gonna put that out there. This was a super sad, depressing night for American politics. Biden tried to bring substance, but there wasn't a lot of it. Trump had no substance at all, but then again, he's kind of famous for not being substantive. And there was just no sense of a topic. I was also rather unhappy, the visual of Biden looking down so much. I don't know what that was about. The Biden gaffe machine was definitely on full blast. I think as a visual, Trump did look better from a purely visual presentation. Trump did look better than Biden did in various moments and all this type of thing. However, to Biden's credit, he did get in a good couple of zingers. And the losers and suckers thing was good on the military, and some of the other stuff that he got in there was definitely quality hits on Trump. So I think Biden did land a good couple blows. But I think remember in the beginning of the broadcast I said how social media handles this is going to set the narrative and it's going to affect the polling next week. I think the social media narrative is going to be Trump was blustery but looked good. Biden lacked substance and looked old and tired. And there's going to be gifable gaffes. There's going to be memeable moments. It's already started on Twitter. And Biden needed he needed to do well tonight, and he didn't. And I think it's going to hurt. I trust me, I don't want that to be the case. I needed him to do well. I needed him to happen. There were some entertaining comments in the chat about, it's like watching your grandpa try to do something great sort of thing. And it just wasn't there. And I think for all of his bluster, Trump definitely came off looking better, more put together, more energetic than Biden did. I think that, I think Biden definitely came off as tired and not energetic and all this type of thing. They got in an argument over their golf handicaps towards the end. I mean, this was just, honestly, if American politics were a moment, tonight is emblematic of it. you know, for better or for worse, fortunately, unfortunately, all this type of thing. This is 2024, and this is where we are. We have two men in their 80s who are arguing about their golf scores on national television while cost of living is up. The cost of, neither of them really address things like cost of childcare, all this type of thing, and I think everyone's leaving this debate less satisfied than when we started. I'm sure that there are some people out there for whom this will be a decisive moment for how they're going to vote. Someone posted the markets in Vegas that had 60-40 in favor of Trump winning based upon the debate tonight, based upon the bets being placed right now. So it's this was not great. I'll say it. This was not so good. So so very tough night. I wish there were kind of more to talk about, but there was so little substance. Trump did do the tour de force of the current right-wing talking points. You know, no new wars. Immigrants pouring over the border. You know, it was basically, you know, has Fox News talked about it in the last week? It was coming out of Trump's mouth, and we know that's what Trump definitely does. I wish Biden had been stronger and more forceful, and it had a little bit more together, used his time more effectively, addressed issues head on, and created that contrast. I feel like he ended up being very defensive, and that let Trump be in Trump's ideal position, which is offensive. And I feel like Biden did get in some offensive moments, but not enough. And I think that's going to be the narrative coming out of this. So anyway, as I said, guys, I've been fighting a head cold, and I am super tired, and I had meetings all day, and this was a long one, and I'm already coughing, and my throat's unhappy. So I'm going to go. Thank you so much for everyone who came by and for watching this special live stream. Thank you to my super fans in the chat who kept the chat going and kept it entertaining. Please make sure to follow me on all social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter and Instagram, Cameron L. Cowan on Facebook, Cameron Journal on TikTok. And don't forget to check out this week's interview on the podcast. It is one of the most bombastic ones I've ever done, and kind of echoes a lot of the things that were said tonight. So it's a good one to go watch. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. Have a great night. This has been the Cameron Journal.